I don't know how many shows and how many hours over the last years we've spent talking about Gio Reyna, and it's because of his talent. But maybe this is a Landon Donovan-esque type of move. It worked out for Landon Donovan. The dude's got a statue. There will be people, because of their bias, snobbery relative to Major League Soccer, that just don't like Major League Soccer because they view it as lesser than. I don't care where Gio Reyna plays as long as he is playing soccer. Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This show will be talking Club World Cup and its impact, the return of MLS, U.S. men's national team friendly schedule, Jaws, transfer news, Messi, Gio, Weah, Euro business end, calling it soccer, Cosmos, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this? What are we looking at here? Tuesday, July 15th in the year 2025.
I'm doing well. It's good to be potting with you again. It's been a few days.
It has been a while. We've talked about how you get pulled in multiple directions when it comes to any tournament, let alone multiple tournaments as we've had this summer. So it must have been nice to have a little time off, a couple dark days when it comes to, in a positive sense and a restful sense, when it comes to the Women's Euros. Did you do anything interesting? Have you seen anything or watched anything or read anything interesting?
Last night, I attended a Paul Simon concert at the Walt Disney Concert Hall in downtown LA. It was terrific. He did more than 2 hours, 20-something songs. You know, I've been on this bucket list kick lately. I went to see McCartney, Springsteen, Billy Joel, and now I've added Paul Simon to that list.
Did his wife, Edie Brickell, come out at all during the show?
Yes, several times, which was great.
Oh, I love her. I love her. Man, when she, Edie Brickell and New Bohemians, when they came out with, Shooting Rubber Bands at first album, What I Am and all that kind of stuff, loved it. And her second album was really, really good. Ghost of the Dog, something like that. All right, cool. So had you been to that venue before for a show?
No, and I loved it. I want to go back. Very, very beautiful venue. Now, can I just add one interesting note to my evening?
Yeah.
Our former director, Aaron Schechter, fancies herself as the Queen of New York. She loves all things New York. She's a big Springsteen fan, Billy Joel. I spoke to her yesterday. I mentioned I was going to this concert, and she had no idea who Paul Simon was. Can you believe that?
Good God. Well, I mean, he's a legend, but, I mean, I don't know when the last time he's released something that has permeated through to the younger generation. For example, what did he play for his encore? Was it something recognizable, or is he one of these artists that, goes deep in the catalog and does something, that nobody's ever heard?
The last three songs were 50 Ways to Leave a Lover, The Boxer, and Sounds of Silence.
That's solid. That's a solid encore set right there.
Yeah.
And anybody, whether they're fans or not, you would have recognized those songs. They are classics. All right, good. So good sound, a good show, great venue. Sounds like a wonderful night for you. Let's see. What do I have? The only thing that I have is I watched Jaws at 50, which is the definitive inside story. It's over there on Hulu and maybe some other streaming platforms out there, but it goes back into the making of the cultural phenomenon that it was at the time, the impact that it had on not just movies, because it was kind of one of the first blockbusters ever, but the impact that it had on the director Steven Spielberg, on the actors, even the impact that it had on swimming and fishing and the conservation movement when it came to protecting sharks and, in this case, vilifying them and all that kind of stuff. So it was really interesting to see how it's been made. A lot of the stories have kind of been told before about the shark, Bruce, by the way, named after Spielberg's lawyer, but definitely worth it. Just hour and a half of really cool inside stories talking about all of the trials and tribulations to make it, but then all of the intended consequences and some of the unintended consequences.
I'm very excited for this. beginning in September at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, they're going to have a Jaws exhibit commemorating the 50th anniversary. So I'll definitely check that out.
They did mention was the underwater scenes were shot by these incredible divers from, I think, Australia, and actually shot in Australia. And then there was some scenes shot in a water tank here in Los Angeles, and everything else was actually shot out on the East Coast over there outside of Martha's Vineyard and stuff like that. But the actual shark, Steven Spielberg does talk about the fact that they came to him and he wanted it to be intimidating. So there was a smaller shark that was just too small. And then there was a really, really big shark. And to his credit, he recognized that, yeah, I want it to be intimidating, but I don't want it to go into the realm of, I guess, science fiction or fantasy in that it couldn't exist. So he ended up picking the middle shark, but it's also legendary in terms of the fact that it didn't work, which actually worked out well for him. And it's also a great study in the ability to turn lemons into lemonade and to adjust on the fly, which he did, which actually worked out because we didn't see the shark for a long time, but it was just as scary, maybe more scary, that we didn't see him. All right.
One more note on this. Yes. Jurassic World is out right now. I consider the original Jurassic Park and Jaws to be his two best action films. Obviously, he's made great films of all different kinds, but those to me are his big two as far as that genre.
Yeah, and not only were they blockbusters and made a lot of money, but like I said, the influence that they had on others, either directly or indirectly, is undeniable. All right, now, should we light the scandal, my friend?
Let's do it.
Where shall we start?
We are going to begin by putting a ribbon on the Club World Cup, which ended this past Sunday at MetLife Stadium. Chelsea claimed a 3-0 win over PSG in the final. All the goals in the first half. Cole Palmer got 2, João Pedro got the other. I have some thoughts on the footballing implications of all this. But before we get to that, Infantino was there, Trump was there. This was very much a dry run for next year's World Cup, in which the final will also be at MetLife Stadium. Overall thoughts, takeaways, lessons from this summer as it pertains to next summer.
Yeah. So, oh my goodness. I think this is, talk about a case study, and a fascinating case study. I think that the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup this summer was absolutely kind of an imperfect work in progress. And I think that FIFA and Gianni Infantino would admit that. But I think it's also hard to call it anything else but a success when you expand to 32 teams, you move it to summer. All of the media attention, both good and bad, but the attention that it garnered, the massive prize money for the teams, and not for nothing, but according to FIFA, $2 billion in revenue. And I think it's important for some perspective is that this bears very little resemblance to previous Club World Cups, regardless of what you called them. And I think this is certainly the way to the future. And then, there was, certainly I think, and this is where the work in progress and imperfect situation comes, the complaining about the weather and the heat and the delayed games. Who knows? Maybe that informs what happens next summer. And they've already talked about the scheduling of timing of games in order to mitigate some of that heat, the indoor games that are going to happen, and maybe, focusing on that and trying to, again, mitigate some of the weather circumstances that are going on. The final in and of itself, let's get back. I'll get to that in a second, but I want to throw it to you in terms of your overall thoughts of the impact of this tournament.
I agree with you. Listen, it maybe wasn't the spectacular success that the FIFA propaganda machine is portraying, but there are still English journalists out there trying to claim it was a failure, and those people are in denial. It was clearly overall a success. It's a tournament that's here to stay, and I think has the potential to really grow in future editions. But yeah, there were some complaints about the weather and the pitches and all that. So it's just something to keep an eye on for next summer. We'll see if FIFA adjusts maybe some of the kickoff times or not. So it's something to keep an eye on.
I think one of the biggest successes, and I think you'll appreciate this, is in this day and age where there is, and we do this over here from an MLS perspective, the compare and contrast and the insecurity that we all kind of hold and harbor, especially when it comes to what can be viewed as the elitism of Europe. To have that on display and to have that being competed for, I guess, And in particular to your Brazilians and what they brought. I don't think that anybody leveled up more than the Brazilian soccer through this. So and I think that that's an incredible positive. We saw, obviously, Saudi Arabian teams and MLS, certainly they would have liked to have done better. But having Messi and company get out of the group, there is a benefit in terms of trying to win hearts and minds, and maybe even fostering more of that discussion as to, what is the best soccer when it comes to the club perspective out there. So I think that was a huge result, whether it was intended or not, that came out that will kind of propel it forward going on to future editions.
Yeah, the big takeaway in Brazil has been that we imbue all of Europe with this prestige, but really it's just those 8 to 10 super clubs that are on a different level. And a lot of Brazilians feel like this competition unmasked the fact that the second tier in Europe is not all that great. You saw Inter Miami beat Porto, and clubs like Dortmund and Benfica not look all that great. So that's an interesting takeaway for sure. Now, some interesting developments spinning it forward. Johnny Infantino is already talking about perhaps tweaking the criteria for how clubs qualify. And everybody's saying he wants to avoid the Barcelona-Liverpool problem. There's a feeling that not having clubs like that in this edition sort of undermine the notion that these are the best teams in the world competing for the title of the world's best. And so it might mean allowing for more clubs from certain countries to get in there. So we'll see what happens with that. The other thing is, do you want to comment on that first?
Yeah, just because I'm torn, because there's part of me that almost says it should be a relative to, if it's 4 years from now, the next Club World Cup in this way, or 2 years, whatever it ends up being, that it should be cumulative, right? You want the best team relative to that period. And so who knows, maybe they do something like that. But then there's the other part of me, especially when it comes to someone like MLS, that says, if this is going to be a reflection on you and your league and your sport in your particular country, then you want to have whoever is the best team as close as you possibly can to the moment. Because if MLS had just sent 3 teams, they would not have sent, well, they might have sent Inter Miami, but they would not have sent Seattle, and they would not have sent LAFC necessarily, to give themselves the best possible chance of success. So I don't know. Like I said, there's part of me on one side and the other side. It's going to be interesting to see what FIFA decides when it comes to the criteria on how you qualify and how it relates to either a single year or number of years or competitions.
The other thing, too, is the transfer market and the eligibility of players for this tournament might need to be looked at. Listen, as a Brazilian, I love seeing João Pedro do what he did, but it is a tad farcical that Chelsea were able to sign a player in the middle of the tournament. He shows up, just plays the quarterfinals, semifinals, and final, and ends up being largely the reason they won the whole thing. And, FIFA, they very much want to portray this tournament as an extension of the 24-25 campaign, because if you consider it part of 25-26, then it could be viewed as a preseason tournament, and they don't want that. Right. But when you have Trent Alexander-Arnold playing for Real Madrid and João Pedro playing for Chelsea, it does undercut that a little bit. So that's a gray area that people are sort of confused about. And then my final point is, people are debating how much weight to give to this tournament. Now, you and I were down in Miami to do that 1 year out from the World Cup show. Afterwards, we went out to dinner. A couple of FIFA officials joined us. I was chatting with one of them, and he was going to great lengths to convince me that the Club World Cup is more important than the Champions League because it's a world title versus just a European title. And I do think when FIFA do their best awards and they give out a Team of the Year prize, they might give it to Chelsea to double down on that. While when the Ballon d'Or, which is more Eurocentric, gives out their awards, I guarantee you the Club of the Year there will be PSG. So it's just an interesting sort of FIFA versus UEFA debate that's going on.
Yeah, but I mean, spinning is nothing new, and everybody understands that you have to, especially when it's something new in the way that this tournament came about, that you are going to spin it. I do think that teams either showed up or very, very quickly recognized that this was something that they weren't expecting and did take it seriously. And I do think that it matters too, in particular. Well, had PSG won with all of their winning that they were doing, I still think that they would celebrate this as Chelsea is. Now that Chelsea won, considering not a whole lot of winning, they're definitely going to celebrate this as they should. I think I fall on that side that this is a representation of the world, and it says it in the name, a World Cup. And I think that's important. So I think very, very quickly this will become something that teams want to win. And I think we saw it this summer, and I think we will continue to see it going forward. And sing while you're winning. And so if you're Chelsea, congratulations, by the way, to Chelsea. Also, Chelsea, that in the final against PSG, very few people had, and they did not mess around. It was from start to finish. PSG had absolutely nothing, and they deserved it when I'm talking about Chelsea. And they are, from a club perspective, the champions of the world.
Now, I mentioned Trump was there. It sounds like if he has his way, you're going to have to call this sport football instead of soccer. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh my God! There's so much Trump that came with the final. He was there. He was sitting next to Gianni Infantino. We've talked about the relationship that they have cultivated, and will continue. I'm sure over the next year, leading up into the summer of 2026 and the World Cup that's coming. First Lady was there, as were plenty of mucky mucks up there in the stand. And then, well, first off, Trump is doing interviews, and at one point he was joking about making an executive order to change it to football. And I just will say, and I think I told you this story when I was at the White House a few months ago, when I had my interaction with the president. I said, hey, it's called soccer. Don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't call it soccer. As a matter of fact, lean into calling it soccer. It is called soccer. I know he was joking, but it's amazing how personal people take this. And I am going to die on the soccer hill. Probably on my gravestone, I will make sure that in some way, shape, or form, the word soccer appears, because that's what I have called it since I was a kid. And I don't think that it denotes any lower level of passion or knowledge or history. And I wear it on my sleeve proudly, as should the president and anybody else. So I know he was joking. Now, the post-game celebration, that was a whole nother thing. Obviously, he was there. Gianni Infantino, I'm sure, talked to him about presenting this trophy. By the way, the trophy that had been in the White House for the last few months. And they went down, and Trump, as Trump will be, said, hey, this is a great moment. I want to be here. I want to hang out. I want to, scream and yell, and actually was on the stage for it. I loved it. If you didn't want that to happen, then you should have made that very, very clear from the beginning. And if that's not something that he wanted to do, then you would have said, thank you very much, but no thanks, and moved on. And I don't think that it marred the celebrations or anything like that. So congratulations to Chelsea. And again, I go back to the fact that regardless of your politics, having the president of the United States be engaged and invested in soccer, that is a good thing going forward. It is on his watch that these tournaments, whether it's this summer that just happened, but more importantly, next summer in 2026, that these World Cups are happening. And it behooves him to have this go well. And again, that he actually cares. As I've said before, he is the soccer president, if you will.
Yeah, for you Seinfeld fans out there, Trump being part of that trophy lift had some real Kramer Scarsdale surprise vibes. But, he also gave an interview in which he said he considers Pele the greatest player of all time. So he scored some points with me.
Hey, by the way, I know he got a lot of crap for that because, this whole generation of Messi, Ronaldo, blah, 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 blah. This is where maybe the younger generation fails to understand and see what is going on. He is literally standing in the place where Pele, for the New York Cosmos, I'm going to talk about the New York Cosmos in a little bit later on in this show, did his greatest work from an American perspective. A team in the Cosmos and a player in Pele that Donald Trump, who we all know was ubiquitous for multiple decades, including the 70s and 80s when Pele was here, went and saw play. So it actually was completely apropos for him to bring up Pele in that sense. There's the old school type of thing that he referenced, and then there's the recognition of time and place and history that I would submit that many of you soccer folks out there would fail to grasp, and yet in that moment he grasped it.
I mentioned Sunday's final was at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. The U.S. national team's next match will be pretty close to there at Red Bull Arena in Harrison, New Jersey on September 6th. The U.S. will play a friendly against South Korea. Then a few days later, it's Japan and Columbus. And we also found out the 2 October games, the U.S. will play Ecuador in Austin and Australia in Commerce City, Colorado. So we know the next 4 matches, all 4 teams have qualified for the World Cup.
Yeah, so the future schedule of the national team, the U.S. men's national team, is really going to be interesting. And as we've said before, it's going to be interesting for a number of different reasons, not the least of which is who is Pochettino going to call in for these matches. The other part of it, and we've talked about this for the last, I don't know how many years, is that the U.S. is not qualifying, and so they are all going to be friendly games. Playing Korea and Japan, good, solid teams, perennial types of World Cup appearance teams. So I'm good with that. There's a real chance that we would get a type of team like that in our group come next summer, or when the draw happens in December here. Ecuador on the rise. I think that's a good quality competitive team to test the U.S. team against. Australia, whatever, it's Australia, but are these elite teams? No. But these are teams that I think this U.S. team goes in and says, we are as good or better. And so from a Pochettino perspective, it's can you live up to being as good or better, being a favorite, if you will, which is going to happen at times going forward. So I'm excited about that. A reminder, the U.S. basically has, let's say, 8 to 10. They have 10 games, but the reality is that the final 2 games potentially that they could play in June, right before the World Cup, we all know those oftentimes are closed door. Oftentimes it's a mismatch of players. Nobody wants to get hurt. So the reality is, with the windows coming up over the next 6-7 months, it's going to be, well, actually 8 months. It's going to be about 8 games. And again, they are all friendlies. So we will probably make much more of them than they deserve to be made of, but it's all we got at this point.
I really like the Ecuador game. They have a lot of good players at the back. Pacho, Estupiñán, Hincapié, Moises Caicedo in the midfield, Kendry Paez, Ener Valencia, etc. So that will be a really good test. Pochettino facing South American opposition. I like the 2 September games, South Korea and Japan. I agree with you. Australia is the least sexy of the group, but even that is decent. Now, Sean Sullivan does inform me that South Korea match is the same day as Michigan, Oklahoma. And so we're going to tape Spaces right after. It's going to have to be quick or if we go long, I'm going to have one eye on the football game, even as we're still doing a pod.
Don't you worry, buddy. We'll get you out in plenty of time.
In terms of players that might be representing the U.S. in those games, a lot of news, transfers, and otherwise. We'll begin with PSV. They have started their preseason, and in the first preseason match, Serginho Dest came off injured, while Ricardo Pepi made his return from injury. A reminder, Malik Tillman no longer on this team. He has moved to Bayer Leverkusen.
So the Dest thing is concerning, obviously coming off of a summer where he was, asked to leave, in that he wasn't where he needed to be from a physical perspective. And look, it's his body. I want it to heal faster, but it's not happening, and that he is compounding it with other injuries is not good. The outside or the right back position for the U.S. men's national team, if Serginho Dest is, 80%, it's still better than anything we have at this point. And so, I'm hoping that Serginho Dest figures it out going forward. The Pepe one's interesting because what he has done the last couple of years, and who he, still coming off of an injury, but again, not being able to see him this summer. Does it hurt him? I don't know if it hurts him, especially since the best that could come along was Ajiman, and that's not gonna do it. And so I think Pepe really has an opportunity here, as long as he stays healthy, to come in these upcoming games and really kind of grab it with both hands. And Balogun will have a say if and when he gets back. I guess Josh Sargent will going forward, and Ajiman for that matter coming in. I think he'll still be called in, but good to see that Pepe's back.
I mentioned Tillman to Leverkusen. A reminder, in terms of notable deals that have either happened or are close to happening, you've got Malik Tillman going to Leverkusen, Johnny Cardoso to Atletico Madrid, Matt Turner to Lyon, who got their relegation overturned, Patrick Ajiman to Derby County, Damian Downs to Southampton, and then there are a slew of rumors as well, including Timmy Weah being linked to Marseille. Remember, he played in Ligue 1 previously with PSG. He could be headed back there.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about Timmy Weah and how unique he is from a wing perspective. We know what Christian Pulisic does. We know what Diego Luna does and others out there. But, notwithstanding his red card a while, to me, Weah on that wing for me has been the most consistently dangerous. And his pure speed, it's very, very different than a Christian Pulisic. I love having him out there. So I hope this move is a good thing for him. And, I hope that he comes in flying, I guess literally flying up and down that wing, if that's where he's ultimately going to feature when it comes to a U.S. team. Because there's been people that actually have suggested that maybe you put him up at that striker position and just try to get as many of the good players on the field as possible.
He might not be the only American leaving Juventus this summer. There are stories that Juve are looking to unload Weston McKennie. It's vague right now, so I want to wait and see if there's any real legs to this. But nevertheless, it's kind of made everybody chuckle to see that headline again because it seems to be an annual occurrence.
Yeah, and look, Weston McKennie is not a perfect player, but the dude always kind of figures out a way to show his value, regardless of the changes that happen on the field, off the field with coaches. And so he and his agent, I'm sure, are used to this. It's not necessarily a bad thing to be talked about as for the value of a player, but also we've been through this before. We've seen this movie before, and so we'll wait until something much more concrete happens.
Josh Sargent being linked to Burnley and Wolfsburg. Norwich are asking for £20 million. I'll just say Burnley is the exact move he should not make. They're a team just getting promoted back up to the Premier League from the Championship. They're probably going to have to fight to stay up. Josh Sargent should only move to the Premier League if it's a mid-table-ish team. Going to one of the bottom teams, I think, is a recipe for disaster. Wolfsburg, closer to mid-table in the Bundesliga, so that one might be at least worth considering.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a De Bruyne-esque type of thing that they could shine there. So you're saying that you think he has a better, and let's just talk about chances of being the striker and being on the national team. You think that he still has a better chance of shining if he continues on in the championship than going to the EPL and playing for a team that's going to struggle just to stay up?
Yeah, I've seen this movie before with Josh Sargent. He goes to a team where there's not a lot of service. They're on the back foot in most matches. It's going to be rough for him, and I think that's going to really hurt his chances to be on the roster.
This is where you need to talk. If you have national team aspirations, and some players do, some players, I guess, don't, but this is where a honest conversation has to happen with Mauricio Pochettino. Because if Poch says, you know what, I don't rate the championship, I don't think that you're getting any better than there, then you really got to consider the possibility of going, but to your point, where you're gonna struggle, you're gonna get very little service, very little of the ball, and it's gonna be a slog through. But that I would hope that Pochettino is honest with him, as I hope he's honest with all players. But you got to make that call, and you have to have that conversation.
And then the most interesting one of the bunch, Gio Reyna. It sounds like all the European options have dried up. The likes of Real Sociedad and AC Milan had been mentioned, but didn't really materialize. So now he is said to be strongly considering LAFC.
This is amazing and fascinating because, look, we've I don't know how many shows and how many hours over the last years we've spent talking about Gio Reyna, and it's because of his talent, undeniable talent. But talents can only get you so far. So it just, but keep in mind also, we've talked about in the past someone like Matt Turner, and you've mentioned it at times, Mosse, where, hey, you got to be playing. And in particular, for this coach, Mauricio Pochettino has made it very, very clear that he doesn't care where you're playing, doesn't care how much money you have, doesn't care who you're married to or how famous you are. He just cares that you are playing soccer. And then he will evaluate you from there. And Gio Reyna has not played a whole lot of soccer. Same goes for Matt Turner. So it remains to be seen if he comes, I'm saying Gio comes back and is able to resurrect his career by using MLS. I'm hoping that that's what happens. I'm not sure, because if there have been problems, whether it's bad habits, a bad ethic, work ethic, or whatever it ends up being, those suddenly don't just get left when you land at LAX. And again, MLS has its own unique set of challenges. But who knows? maybe this is at a different time in his life, because he's still very young, but maybe this is a Landon Donovan-esque type of move where he finds a place here in the United States and here with LAFC where he is comfortable and he is home. Keep in mind that we've been talking about Gio Reyna since he's been a teenager going overseas. And so who knows, maybe he comes back and this is where he finds the best version of himself. It worked out for Landon Donovan. The dude's got a statue, all right? Who knows if he can have even remotely the type of success that Landon Donovan had in coming back to Major League Soccer, then I think it would be a positive move. But the jury is out still when it comes to Gio Reyna. I hope it goes well, but there's a whole other, like I said, there's a whole other group of unique challenges when it comes to playing in Major League Soccer.
You mentioned the Brazilian League when talking about the Club World Cup.
Yep.
This type of move has become very common among Brazilian players in recent years. A young player goes to Europe, it doesn't work out for whatever reason, his progress is stalled, and the thing to do now has become to come back to Brazil and try to start over again. It's completely acceptable to do that. There's no stigma. Now, the difference is the overwhelming majority of Brazilians like the Brazilian League and want as many good players in it as possible. As we've talked about many times, there is a bit of a weird relationship among U.S. soccer fans and MLS.
It's not a weird relationship. I mean, the reality is that there will be people, because of their bias and because of their snobbery relative to Major League Soccer, that just don't like Major League Soccer because they view it as lesser than. Fair enough. That's okay. That's your opinion, and therefore they will put that upon this move when it comes to Gio Reyna if he goes to LAFC and he goes to Major League Soccer. And they will look at him as he's given up. He's out of sight, out of mind. I don't care about him anymore. Not as many as have been in the past, but there will certainly be a segment of the soccer fans out there that look at it like that. I don't care where Gio Reyna plays as long as he is playing soccer. And then let the chips fall where they may. We'll ultimately see if he uses this, if this ends up coming to fruition. But I'm here for it. I'm excited. And there's a curiosity that I have that I know others will have as to what Gio Reyna looks like in 2025. And can he parlay it into a much better situation when it comes to Mauricio Pochettino and this national team? And who knows, maybe a year from now, when Gio Reyna is walking on the field for the U.S. men's national team, you'll look back and say, that was the best move that I ever made in my life. Or not.
Speaking of MLS, we actually haven't talked about it much on the podcast of late because we were so focused on the Gold Cup, but we're going to get back into it today. There is a terrific MVP race brewing between three different players. Anders Dreyer, the number 10 for expansion, San Diego. He's got 11 goals and 15 assists. San Diego in first place in the West right now. They're having an incredible debut season. And then two number 10s in the East. Evander doing great things for Cincinnati. And of course, Messi, who even by his standards, last 5 MLS games, 3 since the Club World Cup and the 2 before the Club World Cup, he scored 2 goals in each of them. So that's 10 in the last 5 games. And 2 of those guys will go head-to-head on Wednesday. There's a full slate of midweek games. Cincinnati will host Inter Miami, Evander against Messi. Cincinnati coming off a home defeat to their arch rivals Columbus. Miami coming off a nice win over Nashville.
Can I just go back to the top where you mentioned the fact that we only have so much bandwidth, and here on the State of the Union, we try to give you an elevated 30,000 foot, whatever you want to call it, view of everything that's going on. But we can only fit so much in. And as our work takes us in different directions, the calibration and the divvying up of that bandwidth changes as we go on. And the reality is that MLS plays through the summer when there are these tournaments. And so I hope that our listeners and our viewers out there recognize that it's not that we don't know that MLS is going on or that we don't feel that it's important. We just have to prioritize as we're going through. And that's what this pod is about. There's other pods out there if you want to be in the weeds and you want complete MLS or anything else out there, but we've never claimed to be that. But MLS continues to go on. It is a league that I know you and I both have an affinity for. And when things are happening, when it comes to, for example, what Messi is doing right now, we will definitely talk about it. And we will continue to talk about it more and more and more as we get out of the summer months. But to Messi right now, I think not as only is it amazing what he is doing, but again, he is doing it in a league of manufactured parity. And so he is doing it where, while he's on a good team, and there is, a disparity, it's not even close to what exists in most of the leagues around the world, and certainly not anything that he has been accustomed to when it comes to the teams that he has played for, the club teams that he has played for. And yet he is doing it on a consistent basis. Nashville, which has been a very, very good team this year, by the way, you don't need to give him a gift, which they did on his second goal, trying to play out of the back again, trying to do things that maybe you shouldn't be doing, and they gifted it to him. And you don't have to be the greatest player in the world to be able to say, thank you very much, I will place that in the back. So it's wonderful to see. There's still a long way to go as we get through these summer months, but Messi and company, number one, Messi's healthy, love that. And he continues just to show up. I was saying, a star is somebody that when everybody is sitting there expecting you to be a star, you are a star. And Messi is that word in every sense.
On Evander, I've mentioned this a couple of times. The next step for MLS in terms of global credibility is for top national teams in the world to call up players based expressly on their MLS form. We've seen guys who are national team players before. They come to MLS, they keep getting called up, which is nice. It shows that those coaches aren't holding it against the player that he came to MLS. But you want to see, the test case a couple years ago was if Hani Mukhtar was going to get a look for Germany when he was doing great things for Nashville, winning MVP awards. And Evander has kind of emerged for me as an interesting test case for that. I'm not saying he should be called up, but I do wonder if he's even on the radar of Brazilian coaches. Before it was Dorival Jr., now it's Carlo Ancelotti. And I know you find that fascinating as well. You were posting about it after he scored that great goal against Columbus a few days ago.
Yeah, so it's not a flash in the pan. So you know that there is a consistency. So even if it's Ancelotti or anybody else on the coaching staff of Brazil, they can get the information that they need, and they can get up to speed very, very quickly. And first off, whether it's Brazil or anybody else, shame on you if you don't have your tentacles out there. In this world of technology and instant information that we have, there is no excuse for having a player fall through the cracks, regardless of where he or she is playing. You should have enough juice and connection, and you have the technology to be able to track this. So yeah, when he is scoring on a consistent basis, scoring great goals, you, my friend, have told me that this is not the greatest Brazilian team ever assembled. It's not a horrible team, but I guess my question to you is it completely out of sight, out of mind? Has it changed over the years? And look, we've seen when it comes to Argentina, they have not only looked and used MLS players, but they won a World Cup with an MLS player. So it can happen, but we all know it's an anomaly and a rarity. That's okay. But do you feel that he is anywhere on the radar screen when it comes to Brazil?
I think it's a really tough sell still, particularly with a coach like Carlo Ancelotti, who's a foreign coach taking over Brazil. So he's worried about offending sensibilities. And, there are a host of players playing in the Brazilian league that the local media and fans think should be called up. And if you were to call an MLS player above those guys, I just think it'd be more trouble than it's worth at this point. I do think the perception of MLS in Brazil is improving. Yep. It's probably not yet where it needs to be for an Evander to get a call-up, but it feels less ridiculous today than it did 5 years ago.
Well, that's all you can ask. You push the ball up the hill, and you hopefully it gets a little easier as you go along. So well done, and we'll see ultimately that. But next summer, if we're talking about Brazil and you're lamenting and screaming and yelling and complaining about the fact that you don't have a goal scorer, a consistent goal scorer out there, don't think for a second that I'm not on the studio going to bring it up. Maybe you can teach me how to say it in Portuguese so it goes down to our friends down there and say, you had a guy sitting in our backyard here, but you didn't want to bring him. All right.
And I mentioned Mukhtar and Nashville. They have a big one as well. On Wednesday, they host Columbus. That's third against fourth. In the East. I should mention, Inter Miami have played fewer games than everybody else because of the Club World Cup, but in terms of points per game, they actually lead the Supporters' Shield race. So Messi and company have a chance to win that award again. I think Messi has a great chance to win the MVP again. Right now, Philadelphia is in first place in the East. As I mentioned, San Diego in the West.
Yeah, the hell is real, at least when it comes to Cincinnati, because they went up a couple of goals, and then they proceeded to let Columbus come storming back. So that's always fun. Canada's not having a good year when it comes to Montreal and Toronto sitting in the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and even Vancouver right now is on a skid. So we'll see ultimately what happens with them. I should say, when it comes to MLS, we send our thoughts out to Garth Lagerwey, who the head over there at Atlanta, who's taking some time off to deal with a cancer diagnosis. I've known Garth since we were players back in the day, and you will never find somebody who is has more wit and smarts and humor and context. He has seen it all, from the field to the front office. So I'm wishing him all the best going forward. So yeah, lots of stories. We're not going to get to all of them when it comes to Major League Soccer. But you mentioned how well San Diego is doing, and with everybody there, and Chucky and that kind of stuff. So that's good. It's a strange type of year right now, with obviously Club World Cup happening. What's the new the tournament that's about to happen here too? Only
Leagues Cup.
Leagues Cup. I can't keep track of them. All. Galaxy, while they have won a few in the row here, they still sit at the bottom. So it's not a great year for the Galaxy, but at least they're showing signs of life going forward.
And we've also got the MLS All-Star game next week, yes. MLS versus Liga MX. So yeah, lots going on. One thing we will get to today is the Women's Euro quarterfinals. We're taping this on Tuesday. The quarterfinals get underway tomorrow. First up, Norway versus Italy in Geneva. Norway have won this tournament twice. They won all three group games. They have stars like Ada Hegerberg, Caroline Graham Hansen, and yet Carly Lloyd told us on this pod recently she still detects an air of flakiness to their team. So she probably thinks they could lose us, but they are the favorites to advance past Italy.
Yeah, we're recording this on Tuesday. I'm in the studio actually tomorrow for the Norway-Italy game. And yeah, a lot of people down on Norway despite cruising through their group. And, there's a Norway or anti-Norway bias, I guess, out there, in that they flatter to deceive often. So I'm definitely back in Norway over Italy. I might be the only fan that they have come tomorrow. So there's a little preview of what you'll get.
By the way, I love Carly, but we had her do a power rankings. First time someone other than you has ever done a power rankings, and it did go to her head a little bit. She referenced it at least 20 times over the next couple of days on different shows. Well, such and such team, you might recall, which I had number 3 on my power ranking.
She did it well. She did a great job. It was a wonderful. I was watching it from home, and I immediately texted her and said, "Well done." You get a lot of crap when it comes to power rankings. Everybody wants to be in on the power rankings. Get your own power rankings, which is exactly what Carly Lloyd did. So well done to her. Sweden, England, can't wait for that. Both of them are flying in this tournament, so something has got to give there. The Switzerland story of getting out of the group and the way that they did it in the third game was wonderful. And I loved the celebration. And whether you're into Switzerland or not, the home team finding a way out of the group, it warms the cockles of my soccer heart to see something like that. Having said that, they're up against Spain now, and I think this is where they bow out. But they will go out, I think, with their heads held high, getting out of the group. And then France, Germany. God, I'm probably going to pick Germany on that one. The Sweden-England game hurts me, but I probably have to go with England. But it would be beautiful to see Sweden come through. What do you got?
Yeah, Sweden-England is in Zurich. That is a great game. England, the defending champions, they beat Sweden 4-0 in the semifinals of the last Euros. And after an opening defeat to France, England have really turned it on, 4-0 over the Netherlands, 6-1 over Wales. They've got so much talent: Kira Walsh, Alessia Russo, Lauren James and company. But Sweden have looked very good. 3 wins out of 3. They hammered Germany 4-1 in the last group game. They've got stars: Blackstenius, Rolfo, Aslani. So that is a terrific game. I would lean England as well, but would not shock me at all if Sweden took them out. I do think Spain-Switzerland, which is in Bern on Friday, is the one mismatch in this round. It's a nice story. Switzerland, the host, Pia Sundhagen, but I don't think they can compete with Putellas Bonmati and company. France-Germany, it's risky to pick France in any kind of big game, but they've been the much better team in this tournament. They won 3 games out of 3 in the group of death. They have some really talented forwards: Cascarino, Katoto, while Germany did not look great, even in the wins over Poland and Denmark, and then got hammered by Sweden in their last group game. They lost Oberdorf before the tournament. They lost their captain, Julia Gwynn, in the opening match. They've still got Lena Schuler and others, but I think Ari Hinks, who's going to be a guest on this podcast coming up, I think even she would admit that this is actually a tall order for them to go up against France.
Yeah, I've often told Ari when we're doing tournaments, and she's down on her home country of Germany, that I'm more German than she is at times. So I'm picking Germany over France. And I know I had waffled back and forth between Sweden and England. You took England, so I'm definitely taking Sweden in that game.
Yeah, Germany definitely have the pedigree in that matchup against France, including in the last Euros, they beat them in the semis 2-1 before losing to England in the final. So yeah, we're really excited. 4 games over the next 4 days, all on Fox. Should be terrific. So stay tuned for that. That is it, my friend.
Okay, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with Ask Alexi, so don't go anywhere. Okay, welcome back. It's time for Ask Alexi, that part of the show where you send in your comments, questions, and concern. You can use that hashtag Ask Alexi out there on all the old social media platforms. Keep in mind that our handle out there on the platforms is SOTU with Alexi, or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. Mosse, what do the folks want to know today?
First up, we have a question on X. John Saunders asks, Alexi, serious question. If you had to bet on an amount of money that mattered to you, would you bet on the USA winning a World Cup in your lifetime?
Ooh, okay. So I am 55 years old right now, and if my Google machine is to be believed, life expectancy for an American is around 76 years old. So let's say if I include 2026, I have around, let's say, 6 more World Cups. Fingers crossed. Hopefully more, but let's say 6 more World Cups. And we got to qualify for everyone but the next one. My answer, a definitive yes. I think in the next 20 years, because I think we will see massive new investment and growth in the game and in American players. Yeah, I am, and raise my hand. I am eternally optimistic when it comes to this U.S. team in general. Just whether it's now or anytime else, maybe to a fault. But it's not. I don't think that it's at the expense of being honest to you or to myself. It's not blind faith. It's not delusional. It's not Pollyanna or anything like that. I recognize the realities and the challenges of doing something like that, and history is against you, considering only a handful of teams have actually done it. And maybe it's, like I said before, maybe it's just simply being American, if you will, and believing that we can do things that people say haven't been done. So yes, that is my eternally optimistic belief that yes, in my lifetime, I would bet whatever it is that the U.S. men's team would win a World Cup.
Next up, we have a voicemail. Let's take a listen.
Hey guys, it's Scott from Chicago. Hey, I was just always wondering though, how did Mosse get the nickname Statman? Did somebody actually give it to him? Or I'm not in the industry, so is that like an actual term, his actual job description? But love you guys. Let's go USA.
All right. Scott from Chicago. I love it. Mosse, well, it's just directed to you, so you can explain the origin story.
Yeah, when I first started at Fox Soccer, I was strictly a researcher, and I was an animal. Like any game we did, I would put together these research pack. It would bios on every player. I could come up with every stat. And so somewhere around there, I got that moniker. I don't know if it was given to me by an Eric Winalda or Christian Miles or one of the talent around then, but it's when people started calling me. And so I actually used it for my Twitter handle, and it just kind of stuck. But, it's funny. I've been reflecting on those days because over the years at Fox, I've been pulled in other directions. I started writing a lot, scripting shows and writing teases and essays and whatnot. I started podcasting with you, and it's taken me away from the research a little bit. And this summer, we've hired this young guy, Matt, as a researcher, and he is incredible. I call him the Lamine Yamal of research. He is a rising star in this industry. I'm actually emailing with him as we speak about something. And I'm looking at this kid, and it's kind of me 10 years ago. It's sort of nostalgic to see somebody doing the kind of job that I did. So he might be the new stat man. But yeah, there's not really any great story. Just in my early days at Fox, I just somehow got that moniker.
Well, can I say a couple of things about Mosse? And you've heard me say it before. The ability for him to digest and to retain knowledge and numbers is legendary. And anybody that's listened to this show for any length of time, you will very quickly realize how legendary it is. So that he is able to have them and to regurgitate them on a consistent basis is not a surprise to anybody here. It's what makes him so valuable to us. But I have worked with valuable people, especially in this industry, and people that kind of do what you do. And oftentimes, as is the case for a lot of people that are very, very good at what they do, they have a difficulty letting go and sharing and delegating. And I will tell you, my friend, the way that you have done that, it's a credit to you in that you see the advantage because it frees, we were talking about bandwidth, it frees some bandwidth up for you. And maybe it takes a little time to grow into something like that. But I love the way that you have been able to celebrate help and to use that to your advantage. Now, the interesting thing in the office or just in general is when people see you on the street, they call you Mosse, right? We call you Mosse here, everything. But in private, I often call you David. And there are two different camps when it comes to work: those that call you Mosse and those that call you David. And I don't know what distinctions there are between the two. And you answer to both. It's not a problem. Obviously your parents call you David. Was being called Mosse something that happened at an early age? Did it happen in high school? Did it happen in college? Did it happen when you got to work? How did that happen that it was easier for people probably to remember it, but just to call you that?
Yeah, for some reason, some people are just last name people, and Mosse just stuck as like the more natural way for people to refer to me. I actually had the nickname Moose growing up because a teacher once mispronounced my name, and everybody laughed, and then they started calling me Moose, and next thing you know, that became
David Moose. David Moose,
Yeah.
are you here? David
Yeah, exactly.
Moose. Mr. Moose, thank you for gracing us with your presence. All right, look, it doesn't really matter what we call you. We love you, and so there's not a whole. We have to just make up an origin story when it comes to this stat.
Can I just tell a funny story about this
Yeah,
summer?
sure. Well, we'll remains to be seen. Go ahead, tell it.
When we cover these summer tournaments, we have to borrow people from other sports. And there's this graphics person, Jen, who had never covered soccer before. And she asked me to send her all the rosters for the Copa America Femenina. And she was completely flummoxed by the Brazil roster. She wrote back to me. She's like, where are all the last names?
Oh,
and I had to explain to her, no, Brazilians just go by one name. That's it.
Well, look, you are benevolent and you are patient with everybody here, and we love you for that. All right, let's take another quick break. When we come back, we'll finish up our show with my one for the road. All right, by the sight and the sound of the van, you know it's the end of our show. And at the end of each and every show, I give you my one for the road. Come to find out that the New York Cosmos are back, baby. I talked a little bit about the Cosmos earlier and President Trump's reference to going and watching the Cosmos there at the Meadowlands way back in the 70s and 80s when Pele and Beckenbauer were lighting it up from a professional soccer perspective. The New York Cosmos are back again, because this is, I don't know, I've lost track of the iterations of the Cosmos brand in various forms and in various leagues. This particular brand, version of the brand, returns in 2026 as part of the USL League One. Now, they are the New York Cosmos, or the Cosmos, but they are playing in Paterson, New Jersey at Hinchcliffe Stadium. So this news came across the wire. And, the Cosmos, they still resonate as a soccer brand. That's how important they were back in the day. And they've always tried to resurrect it. And they famously were not part of Major League Soccer and have not ever been part of Major League Soccer. The Cosmos as a brand are kind of like Pearl Jam in that they had this incredible moment and there was nothing bigger. And then the world changed, and they refused to change with it. And while they continued on to various degrees of success, it never seemed to bother them. And the strength of that brand that had been built up back in the 70s and 80s was still kind of retained. You say the Cosmos to anybody that has been around over the last 50 years, and oftentimes it will be, yeah, that's the soccer team. And that's incredibly valuable. But I don't know if they've squandered that value, but it always, in the back of my mind, I thought of what could have been had they resurrected it, had it been part of the whole MLS moment. Well, maybe it couldn't have been. Either MLS didn't want them, or a lot of times Cosmos didn't see themselves as copacetic with what MLS was doing. Fine. Fair enough. But there is still no denying the value of the Cosmos brand. So I do wish them well. I don't ultimately know what the end game is when it comes to the Cosmos. And, you know, they've been in court over the years. They've been on the field over the years. They've come, they've gone, they've done well. They haven't done well, but still here in 2026, all these decades later, the Cosmos are still there, just like Pearl Jam. Anything before we go, Mosse?
My favorite Cosmos story, there was a journalist, I forget who in the late 70s, who was writing a book chronicling one of the Cosmos seasons, and he went to Studio 54 one night, and he came upon Pele with two girls, one on each arm, and he said that Pele just smiled at him and said, "Not for the book, my friend."
Oh, yeah, to have been able to get into Studio 54.
Donald Trump's
everybody, right?
player
Exactly.
of all time.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing brand. It's an amazing story. And if you ever get a chance to watch the documentary on the Cosmos, it's fascinating to see how important it was. And it was, the first, and you could certainly argue the greatest soccer super club, because you were able to be a super club back in the day. And, when I was with different teams, and including with the LA Galaxy, I always referenced back, either blatantly or behind the scenes, building that super club, even though it's much more difficult to do in Major League Soccer. Anything before we go, Mosse?
That's it.
All right. Thank you to everybody. Thank you for downloading and reviewing and rating and subscribing. Check out the Women's Euros that are coming up here starting tomorrow. I'll be in studio and continuing on through the week. Keep pounding that button left and right over there on the old, the YouTube channel. All right. Smash that button up and down, all the different things that you do. We'll talk to you again later on the week. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.